morning. This is again a state of the school, SOS I call it, for 2025 last year, and this is the fifth in this series. And I was talking about water walks and Barbie Biffs, especially, and Zanjas in the last one. Well, a new development last year was a tool that I carry with me all the time now, at that time of year, a lot of the time when I'm outside actually, is a small pair of pruning shears. They fit in my back pocket. And what I started to do last year was I much more aggressively began to prune willows, especially willows, but all kinds of things. Of course, multiflora rose because it's so noisome to you when you're walking along. To people, it doesn't bother the animals too much. And other plants that are in places that they really shouldn't be, but especially willows, because I've noticed over the last several years that willow trees are volunteering all over the place because of the fact that I'm maintaining moister soil than would normally be there. And so in many of these places, the willows are opportunistic and they're coming up. And pigs don't eat them. There's almost no part of willow that the pigs will eat. Now another thing that volunteers a lot is autumn olive. But I've kind of got that under control here, pretty nearly under control. But it still takes pruning. Now I also take larger pruners. If I'm going out and I'm going to do nothing but prune, I'll take bigger pruning shears and lop off branches. But what I've found with multiflora rose, no, not that, autumn olive, is that by cutting the lower branches, it goes into a bit of a tree, not a very high one, and it offers shade in the summer. It does not become a problem. Now, if you were trying to grow grains or row crops, that's another matter I'll deal with later. Or where you're going to be driving machinery, then they would be a real big problem. But the pigs uproot them when they're small, to some extent. That's part of it. And I've begun to prune them. And I'm actually glad to see them coming along because I've learned a lot about soil and its dryness and its temperature in the hot summer when it gets dry, and what a difference it makes if that soil is shaded, even by weeds. Now this is a bigger subject than maybe I better deal with right now, but my point is that a new activity of mine, which is extensive for several months, is pruning. But I go along with a hoe. I do it as I do my water walks, and I maintain my water flows and my ditches, and I widen them and tune them up, and they develop, they evolve over time, every year, more so. But I also stopped mowing, basically almost mowing anything. Now my son and wife, they're different minded about a lot of things from me. And they really like to have it mowed up short around the houses and buildings wherever they can, with a push mower, with a gas push mower. And partly because my wife's afraid of snakes. If the grass is high, she's afraid she'll come across a snake. I mean, it's the standard American way. If I were here by myself, I would have almost nothing mowed around these buildings. I would just graze it with the goats. I don't know about the pigs because they do tend to uproot. But even their uprooting, that's what they do when they first get onto land that hasn't had pigs on it for a very long time. Yeah, they uproot that. But after that, for the rest of that year and the next season, other plants come back. They come back well. The ground's actually more fertile for the pigs having been there, but not with the same stuff that they uproot. So, I mean, it was almost like plow. It was a lot like plow. When I first turned pigs on some of this land, they were turning up pieces of sod almost the size of a coffee table, ripping it up and rolling it over to get at that stuff that was down there. And I probably should not get into that. But so pruning, yes, a lot of it. And I'm gradually developing hedges, of course, because, now if I've got a willow coming up right in the middle of one of my zonjas, I cut it real short. I can't have that, or I'll try to go around it. But any willows that are on the downslope side of a zonja, I'll prune them to the extent that I need to get back past there. But the other thing I do is I also harvest willow. There are a lot of places where a different kind of willow really branches out a lot, puts out a lot of sports, and I harvest them. And last year, I even started to make some baskets, or try to make baskets out of willow. I can do that, and I will do that. And I'm getting enough of a harvest of them that that'll eventually become part of my yearly activity, or somebody else, if they want to try to do some basketry. I can mention Gabriel in this context, because when he was first here, I tried to think, do I have work for him that I could use him for? I don't have money, and the most work I've ever regularly had was a man 2 hours a week, and he moved away. That's Adam the Oxman. But I thought, well, I'll let, if he can get here on his bicycle, where he stays was his business, I could use him for a couple hours more often than that. And at first he threw himself into it. He pruned a lot of willows. And he also had this idea that he wanted to be a blacksmith. And we started to move my blacksmithing shop up to another spot. But that's getting on to a whole other subject. I've meant to talk about pruning and mowing neglect, even ragweed. There's very few plants that people would normally call weeds that I cut or mow. They eventually, by the time the year is over, they're back flat on the ground. The pigs have either trampled them or nibbled at them, eaten them in season, getting the fruit. I don't know. I'm going too long. Bye for now.